He was the man with piercing blue eyes and a jawline that looked like it was carved from granite. Burt Lancaster was a titan of Hollywood's golden age, a former circus acrobat who leaped onto the silver screen and became a symbol of intense, rebellious integrity. He could play a swashbuckling pirate, a condemned prisoner, or a flawed preacher with a power that few could match. To the world, he was an icon, a rare blend of steel and soul who commanded respect. But behind the scenes, away from the rolling cameras and adoring crowds, Lancaster was a relentless observer. He saw the inner workings of the Hollywood machine with a clarity that was both a gift and a curse. For decades, he watched. He took mental notes. And while millions of fans saw the hero on screen, few knew the burden of the secrets he carried, the betrayals, the power plays, and the bitter resentments he had silently catalogued. In his final years, after a debilitating stroke silenced his powerful voice, a story began to circulate through Hollywood. It's a legend, whispered about in biographies and debated on internet forums, of a secret memoir. A final, explosive testament from a man who had guarded his privacy with fierce intensity. According to this legend, at age 80, just before his death in 1994, Burt Lancaster broke his lifelong silence and put it all down on paper, naming the 8 people he truly, deeply despised. Now, let's be crystal clear, no such memoir has ever been published. No physical hate list has ever been found. This story is a tantalizing piece of Hollywood mythology, likely born from a blend of documented rivalries and modern speculation. But whether the list is real or not, the names attached to it tell a powerful story about ambition, betrayal, and the brutal cost of stardom. So today, we're exploring this alleged list of enemies to uncover the feuds, the tensions, and the deeply personal battles that defined one of Hollywood's most complex figures. If there's one name on this legendary list that needs no speculation, it's Kirk Douglas. Theirs wasn't just a feud, it was a 40-year saga of competition, conflict, and clashing egos that became one of the most infamous rivalries in Hollywood history. They made 7 films together, and on nearly every one, the set became a battleground for 2 of the most powerful personalities in Tinseltown. It all started with a fundamental clash of personalities. Lancaster, the imposing former acrobat from New York, was intensely professional but could be overbearing. Douglas, the ambitious son of immigrant ragpickers, was equally driven but far more of a self-promoter, a trait Lancaster reportedly found insufferable. Lancaster once famously quipped, "Kirk would be the first to admit he is a difficult person. I would be the second." Their first film together was 1947's I Walk Alone, and the tension was obvious from the start. Both were alpha males, desperate to outshine the other. But it was during the filming of Gunfight at the OK Corral in 1957 that their animosity hit its peak. The 2 stars, playing Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday, were a powder keg of resentment. Accounts claim their arguments were so heated that security sometimes had to be on standby. What fueled this fire? Professional jealousy and deeply personal digs. Douglas was famously insecure about his height and often wore lifts in his shoes. Lancaster, towering over him, supposedly took a cruel delight in pointing this out. One story claims Lancaster's relentless teasing about the elevator shoes once brought Douglas to tears, a humiliation his co-star would recount decades later. Yet, for all the animosity, there was a strange, grudging respect. They knew their on-screen chemistry was electric precisely because the tension was real. They pushed each other to deliver better performances, even if it meant bruising some egos along the way. Late in life, their relationship softened. After Lancaster's passing, Douglas spoke of him with reverence, calling his death the passing of a giant. But for decades, theirs was the gold standard of Hollywood feuds. The second name on Lancaster's alleged list is Mickey Rooney, and if the feud with Kirk Douglas was a battle of equals, the issue with Rooney was reportedly one of professional contempt. Burt Lancaster prized discipline. Coming from the grueling world of circus performing, he approached his work with a craftsman's focus. Mickey Rooney, on the other hand, had a reputation that was the polar opposite. Rooney was a child star of immense talent, but behind the cheerful facade was a man known for a chaotic personal life and disruptive on-set antics. He was a compulsive gambler, often taking calls from his bookie on set, and his hyperactive personality became a liability as he grew older. While Lancaster and Rooney never shared the screen in a major production, their paths crossed in the tight-knit world of classic Hollywood. The legend of the list claims Lancaster's animosity stemmed from his disdain for Rooney's lack of professionalism. To Lancaster, a film set was a finely tuned machine. Rooney was often viewed as a loose cannon who treated it like his personal playground. It's this perception of unprofessionalism that Lancaster, the consummate pro, would have found intolerable. Lancaster was known for his intense involvement in his work, but his arguments were always in service of the film. Rooney's disruptions were often seen as self-serving. In Lancaster's eyes, Rooney may have represented a waste of talent, a cautionary tale of what happens when immense gifts are squandered. For a man who built his career on grit and discipline, Mickey Rooney's perceived attitude was not just an annoyance, it was an insult to the craft itself. The inclusion of Spencer Tracy on this supposed list is, at first glance, perplexing. Tracy was, and still is, regarded as one of the finest screen actors of all time. He was revered for his naturalistic style. However, the very things that made Tracy a legend may have been the source of animosity from a new guard star like Lancaster. They worked together on the landmark 1961 film Judgment at Nuremberg, and both gave monumental performances. It was on this set that their different approaches to acting became clear. Tracy was the master of invisible acting. His famous advice was to know your lines and don't bump into the furniture. Lancaster, the physical, often explosive performer, came from a world of grand gestures. According to the lore, Lancaster's issue with Tracy wasn't about talent, but attitude. Tracy had a reputation for being gruff and emotionally distant, burdened by a private life of struggle. This translated into a professional demeanor that could come off as aloof. Lancaster, who was intensely involved in confrontational, may have interpreted Tracy's quiet professionalism as a form of condescension. Furthermore, Tracy represented the old Hollywood studio system. He was an MGM man, a pillar of the establishment. Lancaster was a rebel. He was one of the first major stars to form his own production company, Hectail Lancaster, to gain creative and financial control. This was a radical move that put him in opposition to the values of the old guard, where Tracy was king. The legend suggests Lancaster saw Tracy as a symbol of a Hollywood resistant to change, a living monument he was constantly being measured against. We're wading through some of Hollywood's most scandalous and secretive corners, where the line between fact and legend is pretty blurry. Whose side are you on in the epic Lancaster-Douglas rivalry? Do you think these feuds were driven more by professional jealousy or personal animosity? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're enjoying this trip into the dark side of the Golden Age, make sure you hit that subscribe button for more revelations. Of all the names on this alleged list, one stands out as a real-world adversary, J. Edgar Hoover. The feared director of the FBI represented a threat that went far beyond box office competition. For Burt Lancaster, the conflict with Hoover was a deeply personal and political battle for his reputation and his career. Lancaster was more than just a movie star, he was a man of firm political convictions. He was a staunch liberal, a supporter of the civil rights movement, and an outspoken critic of political witch hunts. In the paranoid atmosphere of Cold War America, these were dangerous positions for a public figure to take. And J. Edgar Hoover, a man obsessed with the perceived threat of communism, took notice. The FBI began keeping a file on Lancaster in the late 1940s, tracking his associations and flagging him as a potential subversive. They investigated him for his support for the Civil Rights Congress and even delved into his private life, documenting rumors of alleged homosexual behavior to find leverage against him. Whether these rumors were true or fabrications created by Hoover to smear an opponent, the intent was clear: to intimidate and silence a powerful liberal voice. The animosity became direct in 1957 when Lancaster requested a tour of the FBI headquarters. The request was personally denied by Hoover, who cited Lancaster's subversive association. This was a direct slap in the face. Hoover's FBI also interfered with Lancaster's career, forcing him to sign an affidavit swearing he was not a communist before he could get a visa to shoot a film in Mexico, an act Lancaster knew was orchestrated to humiliate him. Unlike the other names on this list, the hatred here wasn't born of ego. It was born of political persecution. For Burt Lancaster, J. Edgar Hoover wasn't just a person he hated, he was the embodiment of a corrupt and paranoid system that stood against everything he valued. We now venture deeper into pure Hollywood legend, with names whose inclusion on the list is entirely speculative and lacks any concrete evidence. The stories persist, however, painting a picture of Lancaster at odds with some of Hollywood's most iconic figures: Elizabeth Taylor, Marilyn Monroe, Natalie Wood, and even James Stewart. The common thread connecting these alleged feuds isn't a specific incident, as Lancaster never even worked with Taylor, Monroe, or Wood. Instead, the lore suggests he disliked what they represented. The legend claims he saw Elizabeth Taylor as a storm wrapped in silk, a master manipulator whose dramatic personal life caused chaos on set. Marilyn Monroe, with her notorious lateness and insecurities, was allegedly seen by Lancaster as someone who wielded fragility like a weapon to avoid professional responsibility. And Natalie Wood, a talented actress who transitioned from child star, was supposedly resented for her rapid rise and calculated ambition. Again, these are almost certainly fabrications. But perhaps the most bewildering name on the mythical list is James Stewart. Stewart was the embodiment of American decency, a decorated war hero, and by all accounts, a kind man. Why would Lancaster hate him? The theory has nothing to do with personal conflict. Instead, it's suggested that Lancaster resented the very idea of Jimmy Stewart. Lancaster played morally complex, rebellious characters. Stewart was Hollywood's reliable moral center. The speculation is that Lancaster, ever the competitor, saw Stewart's wholesome persona as a kind of cinematic fraud and felt overshadowed by his universal popularity. These entries highlight the purely speculative nature of the hate list. There's no smoke, let alone fire. Their presence on the list feels like an attempt to psychoanalyze Lancaster, casting him as a man so consumed by professional pride that he resented even the most beloved figures in his industry. The story of Burt Lancaster's secret hate list is a fascinating, yet cautionary, tale. It's a narrative woven from one part documented fact, one part Hollywood gossip, and several parts modern myth-making. The towering feud with Kirk Douglas was very real. The political battle with J. Edgar Hoover was also real, a testament to Lancaster's courage. But as we move down the list, the ground gets shaky. The issues with Mickey Rooney and Spencer Tracy seem rooted in professional differences. And the inclusion of icons like Elizabeth Taylor, James Stewart, and Marilyn Monroe drifts entirely into speculation. It's highly unlikely these names were objects of Lancaster's personal ire, but rather symbols of a Hollywood system he often fought against. So, did an 80-year-old Burt Lancaster really pen a final, vengeful list? The evidence says almost certainly not. But its endurance tells us something important about his legacy. He was a man of immense complexity and contradiction, a tough guy who collected fine art, a rebel who became a king. He was a fighter. Perhaps the list, real or imagined, is simply a reflection of a fundamental truth. In a world built on image and ambition, a man of such fierce integrity is bound to have a few battles to his name. The legend persists not because it's true, but because it feels true to the spirit of the man himself, powerful, defiant, and unforgettable.